Today we're delighted to have Sunil. He's been, I think many of you would have seen his work, so there's not much to say about his work. But what really excites me about Sunil's work is how he brings society, history and theatre together to tell us stories that are both completely entertaining, but at the same time just great learning, awareness experiences. So Sunil, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Junoon, and thank you all for coming here on a Saturday evening. I've tried to, in my kind of slightly ham-handed way, try to put together something that might, make this talk a little more illustrative. Samira, in her introduction also, when she asked me to come and do this, she said, would you like to speak about the way you use history in the theatre? So just before I begin, the intent was not to do that. It wasn't as though one began saying, come on, let's put history on stage. It wasn't like that. I do theatre, and we all look for a way to do our theatre. For some of us, it's really important to use theatre to say something. Unfortunately, I was born, I spent my early years in the theatre in the 70s when what you said was important. The whole idea of art was that you needed to say something with art.
The other one off. The other mic is also on.
Sorry, one second.
Hello? Is that better? Yeah? Okay, yeah. I think it was that. So, you took the idea of being an artist quite seriously. And I don't know if this is working.
Keep the mic a little further. It might help. Or maybe no mic.
Some people know what the other one should not do.
Yeah.
Protect her voice.
Okay.
Yeah, so throughout one's life in the theatre, and been some time now, it's always had to be something. You always had to say something through it. So even if it was somebody else's play, the whole idea was that you took somebody's play. Whereas somebody else's play, the process is the playwright writes a play, and then you decide you want to do it. And why do you decide you want to do one particular play and not another? Because one particular play speaks to you, it tells you something. You find connections with it, and you use that script, that text, to actually say something unique of your own. That's the intent. That should be the intent, anyways. I believe that. And that's why sometimes it's very hard for a playwright to give away a script, because what happens is that somebody writes it and they put their life into it in some way, their experience of life, and then it's handed over to a director and a group of actors. And the only way that play would be meaningful and would work is if this group actually made the play their own. So it's interesting that that's the contradiction, that to make it work, it has to be your personal expression, and it's possible that your personal expression may not be quite what the playwright had in mind. It's possible. Sometimes wonderful things happen and new truths emerge, simply because other people are putting their unique lives into the play. So, sometimes it's a happy coming together, sometimes it's disastrous, and playwrights will disown the production, walk away in a half, etc., etc. For the longest time, I started directing sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, and before that I was an actor. And for the longest time I worked this way. I took scripts that I particularly liked, and then I interpreted them in a way that I could. And because theatre has never really been the way, you couldn't really make a living in the theatre, and you still can't for most, especially the kind of theatre we do. So it became very important for me to look for other ways to make a living. People still do that. A lot of young actors, for instance, work in television, in cinema, do voicing, do ads, whatever else they write. But in the 80s, the kind of options were slightly more limited. There was no television to begin with, and stuff like that. So I took to writing. I became a kind of a journalist. And that worked well with me, because ever since I was in school, this place here, you become
And there are gaps in the middle, so it should not be there.
Squeeze people, squeeze, squeeze.
Some of you, you can go up and sit if you're 13 and above, then you're allowed to go.
Unlike this is there.
That is sometimes.
He's my favorite.
We'll wake you
I
up.
wish I could. Can I record that? Yes, I can. Yeah, I got that recorded as well.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate that when I was in school, I got very interested in history. I had a very inspiring history teacher who, for instance, told me I didn't sit in class as long as I, read. She gave me a reading list and said, sit in the library and read. And if you're doing that, then you need to in class.
Yeah. Who was this teacher?
Yeah, it's a fairly well-known school now. It wasn't so well-known in the 60s when I was there. Rishi Valley. See, everybody. That makes sense, right? Yeah. So I guess it was the Tridha of the 60s. Yeah. So I was very interested in history. It just was very fascinating for me. And so when I started looking for something to do, it seemed like journalism seemed like a good way to earn a living. So I did that for a while. And then when television opened up to private producers, I started writing for television. But invariably, I found myself writing about real things. About I'm not very good at fiction. I needed research material. I needed stuff like that to write. So all the television work I did was based on this kind of research. And I think the longest project I did, which is related to what we're talking about, is the mega series that Shan Benegal did in the 90s called Bharat Ek Khoj, the whole Discovery of India series. So I wrote that for 3 years. So there has been a kind of a continuing engagement with history out of pure interest, and then it became professional. And then when television went private, in the sense that the satellite channels came in, I discovered that there was no place for this kind of program. So a friend of mine and I, we got into making documentary films. So it's a bit perverse. I mean, you do theatre and then you make documentaries for a living. It just gets worse and worse. But I found that my interest in history and sociology and all the related, social sciences broadly work very well in the documentary business, because most independent documentaries are about society, understanding society. Through this period, I was doing theatre constantly. That's been the one constant in my life. And I tried very hard to keep these two things separate for various reasons. So my documentary work, when I was there, I just switched off. A lot of people who I worked with in the theatre didn't know I did documentary, and vice versa. So that was the existence. Around mid-2000, 2004, 2005, a friend of mine, Ramu Ramanathan, who's a writer, told me that he was writing a play on the history of the textile mills of Bombay. And that fascinated me. It just seemed like a wonderful idea. For the longest time, I believed that in a city like Bombay, which has such a profound working class history, in fact, I believe that Bombay is what it is to a large extent, in the sense that it's far more democratic, less feudal than most other Indian cities, is because of its very strong working class history. So today, a guy who's making street food, a guy who's running an auto rickshaw, sees himself or herself as a professional. You can't mess with the working class here. There is a certain dignity, there is a certain awareness. And that's very refreshing in Bombay. That's what we always have celebrated Bombay for. It's largely due to this very powerful working class history, and the textile mills have been a very important part of this history. And I always regretted the fact that our theatre has not really reflected this. Why don't we see stories about this part of this city, this part of its history? And I tried to do this briefly at one point, and we tried to do something, it didn't work out. So when Ramu talked about Cotton 56, Polyester 84, which is the play that eventually happened, we got very excited. And because of the manner in which he wrote this play, it was heavily research based. It was based on a lot of conversations he had with workers, working class families, academics, people who studied the textile mill history, etc. When we started working on the play itself with the actors, we found it might be interesting to actually involve the actors on a kind of a first-hand basis with this history. Of course, I chose actors who already had some kind of a background. It's very hard, even today, to find a low middle class Maharashtrian family who doesn't have some direct connection with the textile mills. Somebody, as the years go by, it gets, earlier it was my uncle, my cousin, elder brother, who works in the textile mills. Now it is one generation gone. But the memory of that is very strong in most low middle class Maharashtrian families. So a lot of our actors themselves had that background. But it was important to understand what was going on. What was the transformation of Bombay? What did it mean to textile mill workers? All of you who have used the Tulsi Pipe Road, you may have over the last 8 to 10 years seen the transformation. That was the mill district, right? And slowly the mills have gone, and these incredibly huge glass-grown buildings have come up, and you can see the city changing from manufacturing to service. It's happened in the last 10-15 years. So, in order to understand this, the actors were encouraged to go and spend time in the labor courts where workers had been fighting cases against mill managements, etc. And I discovered that actually the skills that we employ making documentary films were actually working very well in creating the theatre production. So there was research, there were conversations with people, there was an attempt to understand history, and he said, oh well, I wasn't so conscious of it then, but as we went along I realized that these two worlds seem to be asking to come together. So I'll just briefly take you through the process. Maybe we can just change this slide. Yeah, so the production that I'm going to first very briefly talk about is Cotton 56 Polyester 84. This is the poster of the play. Very briefly, next please. Very briefly, this is a kind of a typical Bombay skyline a few years ago. The smokestacks, the chimneys of the cotton mills were a very prominent part of central Bombay. Bhaikala, Lalbagh, Parel, that area, which began to be called Girangaon. Girangaon in Marathi, Girani is mill, Gaon is village. So it was very interestingly called the village of mills. Okay, next please. So these are the kind of old structures that we saw, all now of course replaced. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, so this is a typical kind of street, Delisle Road, that part of Bombay. Now there's a monorail, and the workers lived in these were the chawls in which they lived. Basically, these are a very important part of Bombay's cultural life. Large buildings, single rooms, a running veranda, which becomes the common space where everybody meets. So you have a single room, it's crowded, but most of your life is spent really on the veranda. So there's a lot of mixing of people, very different from the apartments that we all live in, where you shut yourself off really from your neighbors. And most of the workers who came here to work in the mills were migrants from Konkan, and mostly from Konkan, but also from the Ghats, and some from the north. So when they all came together and they all mixed like this, a kind of a composite culture came up, a very unique culture of music, dance, other arts that came up, which was called, in a sense, the Girangaon culture. Okay, it was very inspiring. So this was all the kind of process with which we kind of looked at all this. Can you next please? And this is a typical chawl. Very few of them left now. They are all being replaced by tall buildings for the carry on. Yeah, this is like a typical mill in that time. Just give you an idea of the kind of faces and the kind of locale that we kind of work with. Yeah, stop. So the process of creating this play was on one hand trying to understand the history, trying to recreate the history. And the script actually calls upon two retired mill workers who kind of hang around on the street. They're retired, one of them is laid off, the mill has shut down, and they kind of, they spend their days on the street at this public library. It's not really a library in the sense that you must have seen, the Sarvanajanic Vachnalayas, where you have newspapers put up on a stand, which are free, and that kind of becomes a meeting place. So they sit there, they read the newspaper, they gossip, they drink tea, and they watch people walk by, and they tell us their life story. And that's how the play, unfolds. So you hear about the story, and right from the time they have arrived in the city as young men, the way they got into the jobs, in the mills, etc., etc. So the history part of it was fairly clear. There is an entire process, but it was very important for us to also imbue it, give it some kind of, give the audience a sense of the very, very powerful cultural life of that time. And so we created a lot of music for the play. Okay, there was a lot of live music for the play. The Girangaon time, there was a lot of music, and there was a very strong working class movement. They were very, very strongly unionized. So the most powerful unions were run by the communists. So there was a certain kind of, there was a certain kind of activism in their cultural life as well. So we went back to people who knew those songs. I was very fortunate to get the advantage of working with a music composer whose father was one of the most prominent shahirs, the bards of that time. The guy who kind of, wrote music, sang it in open meetings for 5,000, 6,000 workers at a time. Those very, very powerful singers who sang in a kind of a folk tradition. So we recreated the music and created that layer itself. And when it came to staging the play, it was again very important for me to give the audience constantly through the play a sense of where they were and the basic framework of the play. Okay, that was really important for me. I like to work with bare stages. I don't like to clutter my stage with objects, partly because it's an aesthetic decision, and partly it's also because we don't have the money to make it, so to use large sets. So over the years we've kind of developed a style which is very minimalistic. But in this play I needed this presence of Girangaon all the time. And so then it struck me that could I sort of use a painted backdrop, that would give you the sense of Girangaon. And now what would be on the backdrop? So we were looking for representations of working class Bombay and working class life. And the only painter that I knew who actually has been doing a lot of work is Sudhir Patwardhan, who's very well known, a doctor by profession but a wonderful painter. So we started looking at his work. Now this is one of Sudhir Patwardhan's paintings. You can see a kind of a landscape which is very unusual. You don't see this often in visual arts. Next please. Now this is another one of his. You see local train, people in a local train. Next. See the kind of faces and see the kind of concerns that he has. Okay, it's not voyeuristic at all. It's not a kind of a kind of an elitist visual artist, exotica, slumming it, etc. There is a certain feel in all the paintings. Next please. That's Sudhir. A few years ago, he's a bit older now. Next. So we took one of his paintings, okay, and as an inspiration, and we created this design. Okay, and in a sense, it tells you what is happening in Girangaon, now. So you see the skyscrapers on the top. You see the old structures here. You come down to the street level. Unfortunately, this is very small, but this is street level. So there's the stalls, there's the cycle, there's a mill gate, and then the big flyovers that are coming up on Tulsi Side Road. Okay, so we created this, and it's huge. It's 40 feet across and 16 feet high, and it's hand painted. Okay.
Wow.
Okay, and that has an interesting story because there's no place in Bombay where you can hang a 40-foot wide, 16-foot high thing. Where the hell do you hang it, right? Where's the space? So it was done in sections, alright? And it was like working blind, because the moment of truth was a day before the performance when we actually unfolded it and hung it. And I left the theatre because I couldn't deal with the tension. It had cost me a lot of money to make this, and if it didn't work, it would just be a disaster. But it was wonderful. Largely because the two painters that we got, and these are professional set painters, were ex-mill workers, thrown out of their jobs, and because they were skilled, they taken to painting sets. And when I used to go to the workshop to watch them paint, one day I said, you should come and see the play because you painted this beautiful background. They said, we don't need to see the play. I said, what do you mean you don't need to see the play? He says, the story of the play is here on this background. And it's wonderful, that's very true, because this is really the story of the play, in a sense. Next, please. So this is how it looked on stage, right? So these are the two workers, and this hugely, carry on. You see, so the stage is bare except for this little chabutra, which is the Sarvajanik Vachanalaya. The stage is bare, but you are constantly in the presence of Giranga. And it's of course lit and all that kind of thing. Next please. Yeah. You see? And of course you add a few things to balance the composition. There's a street light there and stuff like that. But this kind of, hangs over you all the time. Next. Yeah, this is what it looks like painted. Over time, through constant folding and unfolding, some cracks have appeared, but it kind of adds to the Sorry, yeah. And what was interesting is our first representation was fairly naturalistic, very, just like a painting of that. And we found it was too dull. And so we decided to distort it and create these kind of, very dynamic angles. Yeah. And that immediately made it very, very edgy and very interesting. So that was briefly the process of Cotton 56. It ran for a long time. We performed it very, very widely. It ran for a long time. But I think, as you know, there are moments when you really feel that your work has touched somebody. Like Sunil said about the cake incident, was, after a performance in Prithvi, a lot of young people see our shows. And the next day, this young lady who had come called up and she said, I enjoyed your play last night, but it was great. But this morning when I drove into work, suddenly at the gate, I realized it said Raghuvanshi Mills. And suddenly I understood what the play was talking about, in a sense. And I think if theatre can do that much, I think that's enough. Because we are not in the business of changing society and revolutionizing it. It's a bit kind of presumptuous to expect that. But if you can touch people and if you can make them understand and life around them a little better, if you can provide an insight, I think that's a tremendous thing. A lot of Bombay now continues to be a city of migrants. So a lot of people who've come into the city recently after seeing the show would say, well, we've understood the city better. A lot of people who live here and we have no tradition of passing on history, unfortunately, say that, my God, we never knew this about our own city. So this kind of encouraged me to say, well, let me take this further now. Let me take this further, because this seems to be actually doing something, and I enjoyed doing it myself, and we really enjoyed working on the show. So that's where Cotton 56 ended. A couple of years later, Prithvi Theatre was celebrating its festival. Prithvi Theatre is its annual theatre festival, and the theme for that year was on a very famous theatre director, Satyadev Dubey, who is in fact somebody I learned my theatre under for many years. I worked with him for 10 years as a young person. Between the age of 17 to 27, I was with him. And so they said, will you do something on stage that kind of represents his work for the festival as an opening show? So I said, well, if I were to make a film on this, what would I do? Can I make that into a kind of a theatrical experience? So we dug out a lot of old archival photographs of him, archival footage, films that he had made in the past, in the 60s. We contacted actors who had worked with him, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. We recreated scenes from plays of his, very important productions he had done, plus scenes from plays that he had written. And I put together a 2-hour show, which was mix of live performance, video, dance, whole lot of stuff, testimonials, people talking, documentary footage, etc. It was great fun. I really enjoyed doing it. Again, the show was well received, which was fine, because there was a lot of emotion and nostalgia associated with it, of course. So you have a captive audience, it's not difficult. But again, what was interesting for me was that a lot of younger theatre people came and said, we now begin to understand somewhat the tradition that we belong to. Okay. And I think that's important. I don't want to use the word tradition in a kind of a feudal, in a kind of a way which which glorifies the past. But at the same time, it's important for us to know that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves and our production. Very important. And again in India we have no way of passing this on. What happens in language theatre, like say in the Marathi theatre or in the Bengali theatre, there is a much more homogeneous audience, homogeneous performing community. There's a geographical, clearly defined space, Maharashtra. Okay, it's clearly defined, Bengal, right? But in the so-called Hindi, English, the non-regional languages as such, for instance, who does Hindi belong to? It doesn't belong to anybody and it belongs to everybody, right? So it's very difficult. So especially for people who work in this kind of theatre, it's just not possible. The modern contemporary traditions are just not passed on. So that got me thinking, and it was very heartfelt, the response. And I said, well, in a sense, what we did for 2 hours traced Dubey's life and career as a theatre person, but because I'm interested in history, and because I was trying to make connections with a production of his, with what was happening in theatre at that time, to see how he responded to that, I said, can I use the same technique to talk about an idea this time, and not about a person? And I was sitting at Bangalore airport waiting for someone who was late, and it struck me, I said, one of the things that really bothers us, and this was a few years ago, things haven't got better, but one of the things that bothered me tremendously was the whole idea of censorship. Performing arts, painters, name it, are subject to this monster called censorship. And when I say censorship, I'm not really so worried about state censorship. The state censorship is very easy to deal with. There are rules, you can appeal to a court, there is a process. At the end of the day, the police may still shut you down even if you have a valid censor certificate saying it's a law and order problem, which kind of supersedes everything. They can still do that, but still there is a way to deal with it. What is more frightening is the informal censorship, the mob, where people will come and say, your play or your painting or whatever else, your book, your poem is hurting my sensibility, so you can't do it. Now that's something you can't really deal with. It's very difficult because it's so subjective, Often it is driven by other agendas and nothing to do with your work, etc., etc. So I thought, can we talk about this? Can we talk about this idea? And because we are theatre people, I said, let me look at it in the theatre. Can you just turn this slide? Yeah. So this is a play. The idea of this play came from this particular thing. It's called Sex, Morality and Censorship. Yeah. And as the name suggests, that's what it's about. And because we are theatre people, I said, let me use an example from theatre history, okay, to talk about this. And everything started falling into place because in 1972, there was a very, very interesting play called Sakharam Binder, written by a very famous writer, Vijay Tendulkar, right? And Sakharam Binder is about this man who lives with a binder, actually, by profession. He lives a little outside a small town. He's a bit of an outsider in his morality and in every way. He picks up destitute women from bus stands, offers them a shelter, says, I'll give you a roof, you can come and stay, I'll feed you, I'll give you 2 saris a year, alright, a place to stay, safe. In return, you have to play your role as my wife, as my companion. When I say wife, I mean that it means that there is a kind of a sexual relationship also. But it's a contract. When I get tired of you, I tell you to leave. When you get tired of me, you can leave. No marriage, no hypocrisy, all this. We just live together because it's convenient. And for the women, it seemed like a reasonable proposition. Very exploitative, but at least you have a roof to, plays about that. And in 1972, when that play was done, it created a stir. I suspect if we hadn't done the play in 1972, and if we didn't know about Sakharam Binder, that it's a classic, etc., and it was done in 2014, it would have been shut down immediately. Because I think we're far more intolerant today than they were. The 70s people were still a little open. They were still a little open in the 70s. Anyway, so this play gets performed, it's severely attacked. There's such a lot of public outcry, conservative section of society, of course, that the censor board says, we can't give you permission to stage this play. They give them limited time permission. So there's a whole big struggle that lasts for over almost 2 years. But the wonderful thing is 2 things. One is that the director of this play, the director-producer, Kamlakar Saran, decides to fight this. So he goes to the courts and he goes through a process of fighting for his rights to present this play. And secondly, and far more important for us, is that he documents every day of his struggle. So he actually writes down a diary that documents his struggle. Now that is incredible material for anybody who wants to do something, right? Because it gives you fantastic first-hand information, authentic, you know. And you know, Kamlakar Sarang is not an actor, he's a director. So it's very emotional, it's factual, so you can really recreate that. And so we got hold of that book. It's published, I mean, it's well known in Marathi literature. It's called Binder Che Divas, the Binder Days. Unfortunately by then Kamlakar had passed on, but Lalan, his wife, who played one of the main characters, she was alive, she is still alive. She had great memories of that whole struggle, that period. And several other people who were involved with that production were around. So it seemed like a good idea. Let's recreate the struggle of this play, use it as an example to talk about censorship. So when I started talking to Shanta Gokhale, the writer, about actually working on this script, she said, it's interesting that here are city folk, they have resources, access to the courts, you can defend your art, etc. But there are also little traditions in this country, the folk traditions, that over time have been completely dominated and sanitized, cleaned up by middle-class conservative society. And a fine example of that in Maharashtra is the Tamasha tradition. So Tamasha is a folk form, you must all probably know about this. Tamasha as a form came up as a mode of entertainment for the soldiers of the Peshwa army. So it was performed in military camps. So it was entertainment for soldiers. So it was full of sexuality, innuendos. Over time there was political satire, song, dance, women dancing to entertain soldiers. At some point the Peshwa rulers got wind of this and hey, this is something interesting. Let's get them to perform in our court for us. But they said, listen, go to clean it up a little bit because our women will be watching. So just cut off the, just go easy on their sex, right? and the suggestion, please just cool it. These guys are performers, they're getting paid, they're going into court. So they said, okay, they agreed to do that. And then it continues in this way. Independence happens, and after independence there is this great nationalistic surge, this nationalistic project where we have to rediscover our traditions because you have to reject all that was colonial in which in the process. For instance, Western classical music was thrown out because it was seen as colonial music. Unfortunately, no pianos were allowed to be imported into India because it represented the colonial music. So tragedies took place, but also absurdities. So Tamasha was embraced by the middle-class urban Maharashtrians. It's our tradition, it's our folk form. Come on, let's put it on the stage in cities outside its context. Let's bring it onto the stage. But then they said, we're not so interested in all this satire and all this kind of thing. Yeah, there's a song and dance. Okay, so let's make it song and dance and clean it up a little bit more. So it got cleaned up a bit more. Eventually they said, drop the drama part of it. Let's just have women dancing. So it's great because in the name of tradition, you can watch this wonderful, beautiful women dancing suggestively because Tamasha is completely about seduction. Lavani and Tamasha is completely about seduction. So, you can go home feeling that you have supported culture, but you also got to see. You see that a very, very proud and a very dynamic and a powerful tradition is, is completely distorted. So Shanta suggested, let's juxtapose what happened to Sakaram Binder in the struggle with what happened to Tamasha and Lavani. Alright. And as a director, it sounded fantastic to me because it allowed me to use song and dance, and I love using live music on stage. And I thought the irony would be very interesting. So we did about 8 months of research because this had to really be created from scratch, in a sense. Okay. I think one of the most entertaining moments for us was when I went to the censor board. We have a stage scrutiny board in Maharashtra. So all that we perform for audiences, we have to send our scripts to this board, and then somebody reads it and decides what is okay and what is not. They either suggest cuts or and it's absurd because pre-censorship never works, especially in live performance. I mean, I can say yes, yes, yes to every cut and go on stage and do exactly what I want, right? Which is what we do very often.
There you go. Yes.
I will send, at the risk of being arrested, very often I will even send a sanitized script to them. so that they have no clue what we're actually performing on stage. So games get played, but at that time I was a little more idealistic, and I felt that when I could take them on head on, etc. So I went to the censor board to talk to them about this particular Sakaram binder and what material I could get out of there. And it's very interesting that the chairman of the censor board, I don't know if he's still there today, he's a well-known poet from Marathwada. So he spends a few days in Bombay signing files and goes back to Marathwada and does what he has to do. He happened to be in office that day. And so the clerk was very nervous. He said, no, I can't give you any information. The usual Indian thing about not letting out anything. So I said, let me speak to the chairman. He said, hi, he's here. So I walked in there and this guy said, oh, in 1975, when I was a student in university, I traveled to Pune to see one of your plays. I said, oh, I have somebody who knows the kind of theatre we do. So he said, what do you want? And I said, this is what I want. So he said, he called the clerk and he said, give him the controversial file. So this file came to me, which had all the, it had notings and letters and correspondence of all the plays over the last 45 to 50 years that the censor board had problems with. And that was given to me. I could take it out of the office, Xerox the whole thing and return it to them. So between Kamlakar's material, the diary, and this censor board thing, it was amazing material to work. Amazing material to work. Okay. So it all came together. It took a long time, but a wonderful set of actors who, working on a mad idea purely on faith, because who is interested in seeing a play on censorship where there are discussions, arguments, etc. But we just had to have faith with it, in it, and we opened it, and it was amazing that from the first show onwards, it just worked very well with audiences, and it ran for a fair number of years. Yeah, mixed audiences, young people, older people, whatever. The point is that it still runs, and occasionally, and it's been a wonderful experience, and reviewers need to label you, tag you. So for the first time, my theatre was called documentary theatre. Okay. Yeah. So that was the way one used, in a sense, history and politics and and theatre and the whole world of actually artists who have to deal with this kind of thing in sex morality censorship. And one last example. So let's see pictures. Yeah. So this is some of the stuff that he picked up. This is an old ad of Sakaram binder from that time, from 1972. There's Nilu Pule and that's Lalan Saran. Carry on. We come through this quickly. Yeah, these are old ads. So fortunately newspapers keep archives, so we were able to dig out very interesting things from the. Yeah, carry on. Yeah. So these were all the cartoons that came up. So hold on. Because of the censorship at that time, there were a lot of editorials on censorship. These are all from the 70s. Carry on, please. Yeah, you can imagine an editorial on censorship in theatre. I don't think today you'd find an editorial on censorship in theatre. Intellectuals, if I were to cut out the date, you would see exactly what happens even today. Carry on. This is slow. Sorry. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, so when they lost the court in the case in the High Court, they decided to go to the Supreme Court. Imagine the state taking a play to the Supreme Court. Just ridiculous. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, now, SS prevents staging of Sakaram binder.
Pratibha Patil's name was there.
Yeah, she was the Minister of Culture. So when we play the scene where Kamlakar Saran tried to go to the Mantralaya to speak to her, because the police had banned the play after having given permission and tickets had been sold, so he went to the Vidhan Sabha to speak to her, the culture minister, and he went to Pratibha. It's there in his diary. So when we played, when she was the president, the character say, and then I went to meet Pratibha Patil, and then we slyly put it, oh, Rashtrapati! Yeah, she was the Minister of Culture. So it's interesting that, people move up in life. Prevent staging of Sakaram binder. This could be from day before yesterday.
Yes.
Carry on. And then this is very interesting, but this is one of the things. This is where as you have to be objective. The point is that when the Shiv Sena started attacking Sakaram binder and shutting it down, they actually invaded the stage in mid-performance, okay? Broke the mics, broke things down. By then, Kamlakar was at the end of his tether. He was really, his morale was down. He was losing money. He didn't know where to go. So, against the advice of Tendulkar and others, he went to Bal Thackeray. And he said, listen, come and see the play. And you decide whether it's wrong or right to do it. So, Mr. Thackeray went and saw the play. And the truth is that he said, there's nothing wrong with this play. And the next day they stopped attacking the play. See, now this is not a convenient ending for a play that wants to do this, right? But this is the truth. And you have to accept it. This is what happened. It's the wrong way to do stuff. But the point is that he did see the play and he did say it's fine. Go ahead, and he told the Steiniks, stop attacking this play. And the play went on to do 500 performances. Okay. Yeah, this is some images of Tamasha. So this is how it was represented on stage. This is the Lavani dancer who actually goes on this search to understand about Sakaram Binder, and she realizes that her story is no different from Kamlakar's story. Yeah, you can move it. And then it was important for us. One second. It was important for us to understand what was happening around Sakaram Binder when it was being performed. To understand where a particular play fits in, you have to understand what is going on around it. So, 70s is very interesting. It was a very progressive time, all over the world, major change taking place. But at the same time, you have a very strong conservative backlash. It always happens. When one section of society moves forward rapidly, another section gets very, very unsettled in the name of tradition. It's happening today. I mean, this is against Indian culture. Now, that kind of phrase usually comes from this anxiety that, society is unable to cope with this kind of thing. So, somebody will pull you back, right? So, we did a lot of work on trying to figure out what was going on. So, for instance, that's John Lennon and Yoko, who were to protest against the war, stayed naked in bed for days, right? The war is over. Carry on. So there was the whole Vietnam protest happening at that time. For the younger lot, there was a big war in Vietnam, when the US had invaded Vietnam, a small country, and there was a big backlash in the country. The young people, progressives, attacked they're still doing it in every part of the world. It's another matter. There's Bob Dylan at that time. And Bob Dylan was a major political force. Next. Che Guevara. Okay, so we are talking about very left-wing ideology, very, very idealistic time. Mao Zedong. Okay, carry on. Closer home, Naxalbari, the whole Naxalbad movement in Calcutta and Bengal, it started at that time. The whole Naxalbari movement. So these were the kind of images, these were the things that this happened at the same time Sakaram Binder was happening. So it's very interesting about the contradictions that take place, Yeah, carry on. Yeah, these are a few scenes from the play. And we used excerpts from other plays at that time. There was a lot of mythology happening at that time. A lot of fake theatre was going on. And so you begin to understand the realism and the harshness of Sakaram Binder. This is Sakaram Binder itself. This is our production. This is not a original production. Yeah. We use video with, archival material from that time, ads from the old Sakaram Binder. A lot of music and dance. Yeah, stop. So that was sex, morality, Alright. Oh. Alright. Is everybody okay with that? Alright. One last example, slightly different approach. A few years ago, a small festival in Calcutta that every year invites theatre people, dancers, musicians to interpret Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. The aim of this festival really, actually, is one of the main people is Samira's dad. The idea is that Tagore, the minute Tagore came out of the copyright thing, and because Tagore's works were very zealously guarded by Vishwa Bharati, in the sense that they decided how it would be interpreted, how to do it. When it came out of copyright and became freely open, they said that more people from other parts of the country should actually be interpreting Tagore to kind of, give him some kind of freshness, a different approach. So they asked me to do a play one year, and they caught me at a rather busy time. So very quickly I decided that I would do a play called Dankar, The Post Office. It's a very famous Tagore play. It's a play about a young boy, Amal, who is very sickly, and his uncle, well-intentioned but a bit foolish, and an old-time physician. They said that this sick boy must be kept in a room all closed up, because that's fresh air, etc., will upset his system and make him ill. So he should be kept almost like a prisoner in this room till he gets better. But this boy is a beautiful soul, very, very curious, very wonderful, wants to connect with people. So he sits by his window every day and has conversations with people who pass by. And there are a whole class, wonderful kind of characters who pass by, the milkman, the post master, etc., etc. It's set in some kind of, semi-rural Bengal, slightly fantasy. And this child is getting sicker and sicker, and the only thing that's keeping him alive is a promise that someone makes that the king is going to send you a letter. And there's a big post office down there, and the king is going to send you a letter. So that keeps his hope up, and he holds on. And by the end of the play, it gets progressively worse, and he passes on. Okay, the child dies. So it's a very sad play, very fable-like, but very beautiful. Now, I acted in Dagghar as a child, in school, and I don't know, Dawood has written so much. It's not possible to find something original out of it. So I said, let me, go back to my memory and do Dagghar. But Dagghar has been done by anybody who is anything in theatre. And in Bengal, my God, the greatest of the great people have done Dagghar. I mean, it's a bit humbling to say, I'm going to do Dagghar, and realize that the biggest names in theatre have done it. So I really needed, having stuck my neck out and said I want to do Dagghar. Maybe I should have done a few of his poems and got away with it. But I needed to find a way to look at it differently. And I did what I normally would do at that time. I started reading about Dagghar and stuff around Dagghar. And one day, out of the blue, even when I remember this, my hair stands on it, I stumbled upon a story that a historical event, not a story, a historical event that took place in Warsaw in 1942. There was a very famous Polish pediatrician at that time in Warsaw called Janusz Korczak. Janusz Korczak believed in the child. The child was for him the center of everything. He believed that children were unique, that they would be given a lot of space, a lot of stimulation, encouraged to be independent thinkers, etc. Now, it doesn't sound so great now and so radical, but in 1942 in Polish society, upper class children were only meant to be seen and not heard. So they were breastfed by nannies. They were in other rooms. They were not. It wasn't on for parents to interact with children, but they were very kept as little dolls, very pretty, etc. And in low class Polish society, on the streets, children were very badly treated. They were abused, they were malnourished, etc. So you had two opposite ends of the spectrum happening in Polish society at that time. And Janusz Korczak comes at this time, has this very radical view. Like he would tell these very rich ladies, your breast belongs to your child, for instance. So you make this kind of statements. Yeah, because they wouldn't breastfeed the children, because there was a belief that you lost your figure, etc. But he became very popular. And he was a Jew, and he ran a little orphanage for Jewish children, where it was an amazing bunch. The children actually brought out a newspaper of their own. Okay, and it was such a wonderful newspaper that the main daily of the town decided to make it a supplement of the regular newspaper. So that was how good it was. Bright kids, very, very sharp, and encouraged by this amazing man. And then the war happened, and the Nazis invaded Poland. One of the earliest invasions was Poland. And they swept into Warsaw, picked up all the Jews and put them into a ghetto. Right? This was one of the first ghettos. So a ghetto is a place where you're literally imprisoned. And so Korczak and his orphans, about 45-50 of them, were pushed into this. Now in the ghetto, there was not enough food, there was danger, and more important, the children were getting bored because they were bright kids, they needed something to do. And at this time, the first hints of the concentration camps had started coming. There were rumors of these camps where once you went there, you never came back. There was talk of death. And Korczak believed very strongly that children must always be prepared for what is to happen. Okay, they must be ready to face what is coming. So he said, I need to prepare these children for the idea of death. So what does he do? He does Dagghar as a play in the orphanage. Now it's fascinating that in 1942, literature is traveling across. Tagore was very popular in Europe, one of the first places where, and he was translated, but what an amazing coincidence that he picks up Darker, because it tells the story of a child who is dying. And by doing the play, the children will engage with the idea of death. Yeah, absolutely. You can imagine what happened. My hair stood on them. I said, oh my God, I had to leave the room. So I said, the other thing was that suddenly the play starts taking on a new meaning. Because what happens is, after this play was performed by these children in the orphanage, inside the ghetto, few people watched. There are wonderful eyewitness accounts of the performance, right? There are historical accounts of the performance. Within a week, the order has come to send them to the concentration camp along with hundreds of other Jews from the ghetto. Again, an eyewitness says that, you know, children are screaming on the streets, parents are crying because by now they know that this is death. But Korchak and his bunch of kids are walking in wonderful formation, singing, holding their flag, complete dignity. They walk on the way, the soldiers tell Korchak, listen, you can, doctor, you needn't go with them. You're a famous man, he'll let you off. He says, no, I go in the office. They walk with dignity into the cattle carts and they take him to the concentration camp and they gas him. That's the end. So suddenly this place started making sense to me, that it was able to give dignity and courage to a bunch of kids who had nothing to do with otherwise. Right? So what I did was I juxtaposed the story of Darker with the story of Korchak. So one a historical event on one hand and one a play. So the story is very pretty, very warm, very beautiful, very Indian, and on the other hand you have this harsh coldness of the ghetto and a concentration camp. Can we just run and just show you a few images? So that's Korchak, that's Tagore. Interesting, look at the intensity on both the faces. Yeah. This is Korchak with his orphans. There is a memorial, he's very, very big. I mean, in Jewish tradition, this is a memorial in Warsaw even today. So I set the play in a concentration camp. These are some pictures taken during rehearsal, so they're not fully made up. But you know, we created a concentration camp. Yeah. So this is Korchak. This is hours before he's been taken away with the children to the concentration camp. The play starts there, and while he's waiting for death, he starts recounting his story. So he's telling you his story in the concentration camp. There are, you know, Nazi guards around him. On the other side of the stage is Darker. So Korchak is put into his cell as a prisoner, and on the other side of the stage, Aman is put into his room as a prisoner. Okay, so you have two people who are kind of cut off. So that was the treatment. Carry on. So you can see this is very warm, very kind of fantasy-like, but the elements of the concentration camp are everywhere. This is Aman's window, but it could be the fence of a concentration camp. Carry on. So this is how the stage is divided. So you have Korchak at one hand in his cell, you have, you know, that going on. Yeah, carry on. And slowly the two words start coming together. Yeah, the two words start coming together. The little boy starts getting interested in what this man is saying. So he starts coming into a neutral space and they start talking to each other. Carry on. And they play games together because he loved children and he loved to play games with children. That's Amal playing with Korchak. Complete poetic license. Carry on. And this is the last moment. So at the end of the play, you realize that the Darker that you've been watching is actually Korchak's production of Darker. Okay, and then after it's over, the play is over, the performance is over, audience claps, the stage is cleared, and they're taken to the concentration camp. So all the characters, that's it. Go back. So all the characters, you know, get out of their Indian clothes, put on these overcoats, and they're out. This is the last moment in the gas chamber. So this was another way of trying to, you know, use a historical event with fictional, you know, theatre. And I think the coming together created a certain edge, a certain dynamism. One kind of, you know, informs the other, you know, each benefits from the other. So yeah, so this is roughly the kind of stuff I do.
Researching for both earlier that male thing or the Sakhara Binder censorship thing or even this or those two especially because you were planning to do the staging of that and you didn't create a documentary film out of that, your own journey.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
film was same, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't create a documentary film. I mean, all the material was there with me, but no, I mean, I tried to in between try and document some things that happened, but it's very difficult to do both. It's very difficult to do both. I mean, it'd be great. I wouldn't mind documenting somebody else's process, as a filmmaker, and I would love if somebody chose to document our process. But it's very hard to do both. It's very
How
hard.
these days we do making of the film along with the film,
Yeah, I
one of us had to
know.
say that,
Yeah, it'd be great to do that. I mean, it'd be great to do. But that kind of stuff doesn't get done in the theatre. Somehow it does. It's resources. It's also not just resources. I think it's a lack of vision in that sense. Yeah.
It's getting done in a small way now.
Yeah, but, we have lots of talking heads. Yeah, sure.
The word, only thing common with her question and mine is the word documentary, in the sense that, when you did the cotton polyester play,
Yeah.
I relate to it quite a bit, because the picture that you take up is finished mills.
Yeah.
I'm one of the few who's seen it as a mill. I've been there as a child inside that mill.
Right.
I was in the middle. My father was an engineer there.
Right.
So if I've been there, I've been to the mall, I have cousins who stayed in the flats.
Right.
So I've seen it right through.
Right.
But the documentary business of trying to document the transition of Bombay would have been, it would be a very different type of treatment. Have you ever thought of doing it that way?
There are people who have already done this kind of work. They have done that. And I know it was not something. I mean, this country is full of stories. The city is full of stories. So, but that's one story that I haven't really got into, because it came out for me in the play.
Because that's only one facet of that story.
Absolutely.
Because there are many other facets,
of course,
and that's
of
the
course.
end of that story.
Of course.
It's the decay point that
Sure.
you pick up.
Sure.
There is something very entrepreneurial about the early part of that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and also something very similar for the censorship bit, because as you yourself, right through your presentation today,
Yeah.
you were able to relate to what was happening in the 70s,
Yeah.
and then you were comparing it to today, right?
Yeah.
There was one other comparison that when you were talking, and you were talking about the cultural modes. When you pick up Mr. Dubey's production of the movie, Shantata Kod Chalu Hai,
Yes.
you feel that stifling sense of
Yeah,
society.
claustrophobia.
You almost feel as if you're claustrophobic.
Absolutely.
Now, today again something very similar is happening, and I was wondering whether you would, especially that one, a more documentary treatment, a film treatment which permits you to go across time,
Yeah.
and is a very different thing,
Sure.
could perhaps be very relevant to today's day and age, because that is being talked about all over the place.
Yeah, I'm sure. Somebody else will have to do it. I've quit now. Yeah, after about 35, 40 years doing other stuff in order to do theatre, finally 2 years ago I decided not to do other stuff and only do theatre. So it's taken a long time.
Cheers for that.
Sunil, I have a question. Sorry.
Reference were given that what will keep fighting from the same song. What was the duration of that? Means pre-independence?
No, not that much. Not that much.
Only
It was limited. It might have been about 15 years. From the 60s to mid-70s.
Would you have that material with you?
Yeah, I do.
Another question is, in one of your, in that play, there is a reference of that tamasha dancer.
Yeah.
No, that's totally different. That's
Another play.
That's another.
Another play. Same actress.
Same actress.
For a different place.
How is it from that side?
Same attractive actress.
Sunil, you're showing us such a large amount of material that you worked with, each of the plays you talked about,
Yeah.
especially the first two. So when you're making a play out of it, how do you make your choices? Because the theatre production is only that long.
Yeah. Yeah, but how do you make the choices? You have to. Anything, whether it's a painting or film or theatre, crafting is a very, very important part. and most people don't like to talk about the craft because it's not so glamorous. but I think eventually you need to craft something. You need to find, like what we did in sex modality is very clear, that we needed a narrative to hold all these bits and pieces together. We needed something to hold it together. So on one hand you're working with lots of bits and pieces of information, but you need something to hold the whole thing together. And we decided that the play Sakharam, the enactment of the play Sakharam Binder would hold it together. So we did and it was also from a belief that a lot of people have heard of Sakharam Binder but haven't really seen it or haven't read it. And unless you know the play, you can't understand what the fuss was about, right? Several people told us, hey, everybody has seen Sakharam Binder. It was very interesting. A lot of people didn't. And so we did a synoptic version of it. And then what happens is that the minute you choose certain scenes, then you know that you can talk about certain issues. Or if there are certain key issues you want to talk about and there are scenes that illustrate that, then you choose those scenes. It's a kind of a two-way process that you sort of play with that. And you essentially try and develop an argument. Essentially it's an argument. You've got to develop an argument. And whatever works to make that argument engaging and accessible is what you choose. Really, that's what it is. I mean, there's a lot of research, there are boxes of research, but eventually it's a process of, it's the same thing. You start with a lot, but you slowly start tearing down and you realize you don't need that.
And also still the ready-made visuals in the box. It's like that.
It's not like a film in that sense, but yeah, the scenes will suggest the way they are played.
With the cast that you select, so you have to tell them all these details to emote so much. How do you manage them?
A lot of talking.
So much in you that each one,
Well, I tell you, it's different processes. See, in today's theatre, modern contemporary theatre, there is quite a trend to do something called device theatre, where everybody comes into a room and contributes idea or an idea, and they develop a play out of it and they present it. I don't really believe in that kind of theatre myself, because I feel that you need to know something in order to contribute. Just because you have a life, not good enough for me. Sorry. Not enough. I'm not interested in your childhood. My dad used to take me to the park and it was very sweet. So did millions of other dads.
Thank you so
Too bad. Yeah, no, frankly. So, but at the same time, you know that actors have to get engaged with something. So there are different processes. In Cotton 56, it was important to send the actors out to get a sense of who were these people they were representing on stage. Because they are real people. And they're not fictional characters, they're real people. How does one understand the despair of somebody who has to go to court every day and nothing happens in the court? But they have to go there because that's the only hope you cling on to. Very difficult to intellectualize this. You've got to see those faces, you've got to see that resignation. It's very important. So that was one way of doing it. In sex modality and censorship, several of the actors that I worked with either knew the Lok Natya tradition, the folk tradition. Nagesh Bhosle, for instance, grew up in the folk tradition. So he was able to contribute hugely to the script and to the ideas, because where we had gone wrong, he would say, no Sunil, that's not how it was. Or this is wrong, or this is right, maybe. So in that, they were able to contribute from their personal experiences, their expert experiences. Okay. But otherwise, it's a lot of talking. It's exhausting. You just have to talk all the time.
So much involvement from your side too.
Yeah. But it's not really that. Often actors are strange creatures. They can kind of, they can find their own way without intellectualizing necessarily. And I'm not using intellectualizing as a bad word at all. I completely believe in intellectualizing. I'm using it in a positive way. I don't think we intellectualize enough, for instance, in a theatre. But they are able to somehow find their way instinctively to the core, and then let the text do the other work. And slowly, over time, they start beginning to understand the text, but in a different way. Not from outside, but from inside out. I've seen performances where, I've had sex morality sense. I almost had a revolt on my hands 5 days before opening, because this is not working. And the minute they started performing with an audience, and the audience was responding, I could see on the faces of my actors their understanding of the play happening there on the spot. And I can't tell you what an incredibly magical moment it is when suddenly after 2.5 months of rehearsal, they start understanding because the experience is complete. They are performing, there's an audience and there's a connect. And suddenly the play starts making sense. And then there's no looking back. So, it's different things. Actors think differently. Directors think differently. I mean, make no mistake. There are different minds at work, different ways of thinking.
Different ways of looking at the same.
Yeah.
And something like this which is so much depth and extreme.
Yeah. But it's a lot about faith. I've been very fortunate to have people who had faith. Because you do something like this very different from what is normally happening around, and then the only thing that can get you to the end is that people believe that no, it will work.
And this last play, Dark Ghar, the way you represented it, you said you did only for that festival where you were invited, right? Did you have more shows?
Yeah, of course.
I've seen it in Mumbai.
Of course, yeah. Oh, you see it? Yeah.
It made a completely different sense after you talked about it and everything came back. I'd seen it 3 years back.
Yeah.
So, from what you say, all I want to know I believe you decide your process or whether you make it device or how will you go about your rehearsals before the script is bound. So you decide according to the production, correct?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time working on a script with a writer. Okay. Yeah. Again, I believe that a writer's mind is very different from a director's mind. So I really depend on the person writing a great deal. So it's a very long, very intense process of putting the script down. A lot of arguments, quarrels, whatever, etc., and it actually gets done. And it's wonderful because that gives me the thinking time. So by the time I'm ready to rehearse the play, I know exactly what I want. So then it's very rapid after that. So sometimes actors find it too quick because they need a little more time to catch up. But whatever. But that's the process. So music composers, writers, these are the people I feel. This team for me is very, very critical. Very critical. I believe my job is to create the conditions for the work to happen. Then like one, parasite sit there and say, oh, that was nice, okay, there's nothing original. I just steal things from people and I know how to put them together. That's my skill. Yeah.
So I'm a bit fogged up in my mind right now. So I get what you're saying, but for an actor, suppose, the way you are connecting to history is because you've researched so much, because you've been there and you've dealt with it in different ways. The actor might not have. So I understand they have a very different experience when they make their first connect with the audience and that's when the play happens for them. But while they are rehearsing, how is it that they connect to the...
No, we talk about it. We talk a lot. We talk about it. And I really expect that if they were... I really expect them to also do a bit of homework, which very often doesn't get done, but it doesn't matter. It's okay, I don't care. But I really think that they should. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a person who's an expert on Yakshagan tradition, the Yakshagan tradition, which is a kind of folk form in Karnataka. And they do this mythological plays, okay? There's this Mahabharata, for instance, they do, or they do the Ramayana, okay? And let's say take the Ramayana, and there's an argument between Sugriv and somebody on stage. And there is a certain written text, and the tradition allows for improvisation. Okay. Now the two opposing actors in the debate will go home, study the text, and come up with an original argument for the next day, which the other actor doesn't know. And so the other actor is suddenly presented with another way of looking at the same issue on stage. Okay, and it's not I just make up something, it's an informed thing. I think that is true devising it. That I make an effort to learn something, understand something, and then contribute. So if actors are willing to do that, that's great. If they're not willing to do that, then I will just tell them, this is what you should do, and hope that over time they understand.
See, today's get together has allowed me to go out of that frame when I was watching these plays or these plays and look at it from a distance.
Yeah.
It has opened up a lot of things.
Sure.
And that is possible because of the
I hope possibly.
I must thank them for this. And it's a very good thing because when we watch the play, we watch in
Sure.
And during our entire day, that is one part of the day, watching a play.
Yeah.
And one doesn't get time to think about it at times. And then this opportunity when suddenly, oh, what like this?
No, I think
it is really good and it is.
Sure, no, I understand what you're saying
This
completely.
recording will be very
But Guruji,
useful.
I'll tell you one of the
This
problems.
recording will last forever.
Yeah, one of the problems that we face today is one of the things. On one hand, theatre in this city is booming like never before. Okay, the kind of audiences we get today, we never got in the past. The opportunities to perform are huge compared to 10 years ago, not even much further than that. Okay, which is great. All this is wonderful. But on the other hand, theatre will also become another product of entertainment. Okay, that's the trade-off, right? I have no problem with that. I don't think theatre should be placed on some exalted position and people. I think this is better in the sense. But because it's a product of entertainment, it also then fits into a day's schedule that you will. So I must do a play which is 1.5 hours long, which gives you enough time to catch dinner and a drink in a restaurant before closing time, etc., etc. Right? People are now looking at it differently. There is not enough space to consider the play or a painting or anything, I mean any piece of art in its own context. It becomes part of something else. And that is the tragedy. And which is why we don't, on one hand, you find less and less plays that are complex and challenging on one hand, and less and less an opportunity for those who want to do complex work to actually be able to talk about it or share it in a more meaningful way. It's a chance, it's a hit and miss. You watch it, if you connect with it, that's great. If you don't connect with it, it's too bad for me. That's sad. That's really sad. Because we really work very hard on doing it.
So another round of generalized tamasha.
Sorry?
Another round.
Yeah, I guess I call it multiplex theatre. It's well put together, it's pleasant, it's neatly done, it doesn't upset you. You can go and still eat a good meal without feeling guilty about it. Whatever, it's that. It's multiplex theatre actually. Too much of a theatre is multiplex theatre.
But that's got to exist so that the rest of it can get done. And
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I mean, everything should coexist. I have no problem, but I will still critique it.
Yeah.
So we have one more.
Do you explain to them how to act and then let them discover themselves, or do you show actually?
No, I don't show. I would love to show. But no. It depends again on actors. With skill actors, they are like finely tuned instruments. Okay, you just have to do and they just
Click.
and it's amazing how they can take over. I mean, you think of it. No, you think of it in one way, and then they'll present 20 different ways of doing it. Those are really skilled actors. With younger, less skilled actors, it's like a wrestling match. You have to pump it out of them. You have to find a way to get a performance. It's very physical.
Because Vijaya Mehta said she's a chairwoman, she sits and directs, but there are other directors who actually show how to act. So, where would you classify yourself as?
I hector and direct. Don't sit in the chair, I'm all over the place and I'm really, it's an ego trip, I just try to prove to the actor that I'm better than them.
Sorry, they have to.
We could go on all evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.